Now, the question that I have today as we enter into Genesis chapter 1, do you share in God's DNA? Well, we are all into this understanding, checking what our DNA is, our ancestry. Ancestry.com has become one of those big time businesses in the world. Everybody would like to know where they came from and their affinities and what they are interested in, what kind of proneness they have, pros and cons of human life, our behavior, all these stuff that we find in the scriptures. So I dare say that God is like every other parent in the world. We share in God's DNA just like you share in the DNA of your parents and your brothers and sisters of your family. For centuries back, we look back and we find the proneness because of what we share in one another. And I want to say, we do share in God's DNA. There is no doubt about it. The whole creation, especially mankind, was not simply an accident that just happened and that it happened and man sinned and God regretted. It is like you and me when we named our children before he or she was born. Did you not wonder before your child was born how he or she is going to look like, act like, feel like, think like, look like? All these things go on in our minds, and I want to say God must have thought the same thing. The reason I say that is because when we read the scriptures, we find God had dreams and hopes for humanity. God had wishes for humanity. God thought of who we are and how we look like and act like, and all of these things are in the mind of God. And so I want to say, we are not just accidents that came about. We were planned and loved and thought of much before we were born. So I say so because God, in the end, created you just like God, created you in his image and likeness. In the image of God, the character of God was imprinted into our soul. The character of God is imprinted into our soul. God claimed each and every single person on earth. For that reason, everything that God did, not only just every person was claimed by God, but everything that God did, God claimed and accepted as part of God's special work. But everything was found to be good and worthy of God's love for an eternity to come. And into that, God has chosen you as well. The whole story of the first chapter of the book of Genesis is very simple. That is, God actually planned you. And not just God planned you, but then also God has planned for you. That's what we find in this chapter. You did not just happen, and God does not ever regret that God has created you. No matter what has happened to you, what is behind you, what is ahead of you, God is delighted with the fact that God has created you. You became part of God's DNA because God actually created you in God's own image and God's own likeness and life. And so there may be some genetic mutation. There is no doubt about it. There may be some genetic mutation, the physical reality of how we look and act like and think like, coming from different parts of the world, how we look like different parts of the world. There may be some differences in the way that we behave and act. But in the end, the essence of who we are is given to us by God. So I want to say, God has actually thought of you, loved you, planned you, and breathed into you, and made you as he is, in the image and likeness, in the character, in the beauty, in the thought process, in the wisdom that God has planted that seed into us. Our inheritance, therefore, I want to say, one of the major issues in life is people struggling to figure out who they are. Once I heard a preacher say that we are not some cheap and abandoned child in this world who do not have some kind of a great history or inheritance, or how our inheritance is greater than what we can imagine. Who we are is more than what others know about us or what we think about ourselves. What we have within us is much, 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 much greater, much more than what we actually are willing to understand and accept. We are are as human being, no matter what kind of human being we are, black or white or brown or yellow, black man or woman, one person from this place, one person from another place, different parts of the world, the orientation and the way that we people are makes no difference in the mind of God, because into every single one of them God breathed, gave the life. And so what is more than that to believe in ourselves? To believe, there is nothing more that we need to believe in. To believe in the fact that God has breathed into us who we are, what we are, where we need to be, how we need to be, every part of that, the seed of that is planted into us. And therefore I want to say that we are created fully and beautifully in the image and likeness of God. But the human problem is this, that we do not recognize our incredible identity, our inheritance, our connection with God. We see ourselves as sinners and people who are lost, people who have no connection with God, who made us the most beautiful and looked at us and said, you are the most beautiful on earth. But we do not have that understanding of who we are. And because we do not understand, because we don't understand the identity of who we are in God, we do not believe the possibility that we have. We identify ourselves cheaper than what we truly are. We think of ourselves as cheaper than and smaller than and less than what we truly are. And therefore many of us behave in such a way that we are not part of the royal family. We do not act like the royals because we believe we are not part of the royal family. We are not part of the royals. But the truth is we are part of the royals. We have been loved and accepted and taken care of and brought into this world with an incredible power, or the seed of everything that is beautiful and powerful. And that is the breath of God. We do share in the DNA of God. So the first solution to our identity crisis, which we need to get through, and we need to get to the other side to find solutions for everything else, because that's a foundational reality, to believe that we were created with love, with kindness, with everything in us to succeed. And so I want to say, believe in the fact that you were created in God's own image. Believe in the fact that you have more in you is more than what you're willing to receive and accept and understand. Your gifts and your talents, your potential and your possibilities are absolutely unlimited, because you share in God's own essence. You share in God's own essence because God breathed into you. What you have within you, in your identity, in your personality, in your personhood, what you have is the breath of God. And therefore, God created mankind in God's own image and likeness. In the image, God created man, and in the image, God created the woman. And He looked at them and said, wow, they are beautiful. And that's how God sees you, that you are beautiful. Before the foundations of the world, God carved you in the palm of God's hand. God had carved you in this palm. God carved you and thought of you, knew your features, understood how you're going to act and behave, look like, and then loved you unconditionally from that moment on. So your real nature is much, much greater than what you have so far accessed. Your real nature is much, much more than what you have so far accessed. Your potential is much more than you have been told so far, or so you're used to thinking. It's much more than that. God's solution starts with your awareness, your complete belief in the goodness in the first place, that who you are, what you're capable of, where you are going, how you became the person you are, in all of that is the breath of God. Therefore, you belong to the royal family of God. That is your identity. That is my identity, and that is our identity, and that's where the world will begin to change. Knowing that we are part of the royal family, and therefore we will act like the royal family in that behavior, in that recognition, acceptance that we are part of the divine and we share in the divine DNA. We will find solutions to every problem that we face in our daily life. Thank you for joining me.